My family disowned me at 18. Years later, they needed my help. I hadn't spoken to my parents in 11 years. Then my mother called me at 2 a.m., crying, and the first thing she said wasn't, "I'm sorry." It was, "Your sister needs a lawyer. And we need you to pay for it." That's the moment I knew nothing had changed. Let me back up. My name doesn't matter for this story, so let's just say I'm the older brother. I have had one younger sister, Priya, 2 years apart. Growing up, we looked like a normal enough family from the outside. Dad worked in logistics, Mom did the books for a small dental office. Middle class, suburban, nothing dramatic on paper. Except for one thing that was drilled into me before I even understood what it meant. Whatever Priya wanted, Priya got. And whatever I needed, I figured out myself. I want to be clear, this wasn't one bad birthday. This was the entire architecture of my childhood. When Priya turned 16, she got a brand new Honda Civic with a bow on it in the driveway, the whole viral video moment. When I turned 16 2 years earlier, I got a bus pass and a "we'll see" that never turned into anything. I ended up buying my own used Corolla at 17 with money from a stockroom job at a hardware store, working weekends and after school for a year and a half to afford it. When it came time for college, my parents sat me down and told me very calmly, like they were reading off a script, that they believed in building character through hard work and that I should apply for loans and scholarships. I did. I got into a solid state school, took out loans, worked 2 jobs through undergrad, and graduated with about $34,000 in debt. 3 years later, Priya graduated high school, and my parents paid for her entire 4 years at a private university, in full, no loans. Plus a study abroad semester in Italy that she posted about constantly. I remember calling my mom to ask, gently, why the rules had changed. She told me, and I'm quoting this as close as I can remember, "Priya's more sensitive. You've always been the strong one. You don't need help the way she does." I told myself that was just one thing. Kids don't need everything to be equal, right? Except it never stopped being just one thing. When Priya got engaged at 23, my parents threw her an engagement party that cost more than my first year of rent. They paid for her wedding outright, venue, catering, a photographer flown in from out of state, north of $60,000 by my rough math. Listening to my mom brag about vendor negotiations at Thanksgiving. When I got engaged around the same time to my now wife, Mira, my parents came to exactly one dinner to meet the family, gave us a card with $200 in it, and told us weddings were what you make of them, not what you spend. I want to say something here so this doesn't sound like I'm just bitter about money. It was never really about the money. Money was just the language they used to say over and over in 100 different ways. You matter less. The breaking point came a few months before my 18th birthday. Actually, not after, before, which is part of why this story always confused people when I told it. My grandfather, my dad's father, had left a modest trust intended to be split for the grandchildren's education. His words, in his will, which I only saw a copy of years later. When I turned 18 and asked my dad about it, expecting maybe help with my upcoming freshman year, he told me the trust had already been restructured by him and my mom as trustees, and that the funds had gone toward family priorities. I later learned, and this becomes important, that a chunk of that money became the down payment on Priya's first car. 2 years before I even turned 18. That was it for me, not a screaming fight, not slamming a door. I just quietly packed the essentials from my room into my Corolla the week after I turned 18, moved into a shared apartment with 2 guys from my hardware store job, and stopped coming to Sunday dinners. For 11 years, contact was minimal. A birthday text from my mom some years, ignored by me most of them. My dad never reached out at all. Priya and I exchanged maybe 4 conversations in a decade, always at some cousin's wedding, always surface level. I built a life. Paid off my loans by 29. Mira and I got married in a backyard ceremony with 40 guests that cost us about $4,000 total, and remains the happiest day of my life regardless of the price tag. I became an operations manager at a logistics company, funny, considering my dad's old job, and we bought a small townhouse 2 years ago. I was, by any reasonable measure, doing fine. Better than fine, I was at peace. Then the 2 a.m. call happened. My mother was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her at first. When she got the words out, here's what had happened. Priya's husband, Daniel, ran a small investment consulting business out of their home. The kind of thing that always made me quietly nervous when I heard about it at family gatherings I wasn't at but heard about. Secondhand, turns out Daniel had been running what amounted to a Ponzi scheme, pulling money from family friends and coworkers with promises of guaranteed returns, funneling actual client funds into their own mortgage, cars, vacations. He'd been under federal investigation for months. And Priya, my mother, swore up and down she didn't know anything, had her name on several of the business accounts as a co-signer, and more damning, had personally recruited at least 3 of the investors, including our own aunt, using her charm and their family reputation to vouch for Daniel. Priya was facing potential wire fraud and conspiracy charges, federal charges, not a slap on the wrist. And my mother on the phone at 2 a.m. after 11 years of silence said this to me, and I will remember it word for word until the day I die. You always were good with money and problems. We need you to help pay for a real lawyer, a good one, not a public defender. You have savings, don't you? Family is family. I sat there in my kitchen in the dark, Mira standing in the doorway watching my face, and I felt something crack open in me that I thought had healed a long time ago. Not because they were asking for help, because of how they were asking. There was no, "How are you?" No, "We're sorry for how we treated you." Just an assumption, instant and total, that I existed to be useful when it was finally convenient for them again. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no either, not that night. I told my mother I needed time to think and hung up. Mira and I talked until 4 in the morning. She's the one who said something that stuck with me. Before you decide anything, you deserve the truth, all of it. Not the version they've been telling themselves for 11 years. So I did something I probably should have done a long time ago. I called my dad's old family lawyer, an elderly man named Mr. Fenwick, who had drawn up my grandfather's original trust, completely unrelated to Priya's fraud case, just trying to finally understand what happened to my inheritance. He was retired but still had records. What he told me changed everything. The trust wasn't just restructured the way my dad had claimed. My grandfather had explicitly designated equal shares for both grandchildren, to be released at 18 for education. My parents, as trustees, had quietly petitioned to amend the distribution terms when I was 16, 2 years before I even turned 18, reallocating the bulk of my portion toward immediate family needs, which financial records showed went directly into Priya's car purchase and later contributed to her college tuition. Legally gray, ethically indefensible, and something my grandfather, had he been alive, never would have allowed. I sat with that for 2 days. Then Priya called me herself for the first time in years, panicked, asking if I'd talked to Mom if I was going to help, saying she didn't do anything wrong on purpose, that Daniel had lied to her too. I asked her one question: did she know I'd had money sitting in a trust that got redirected to pay for her car and college? Dead silence on the line. Then, I didn't know the details. I just knew Mom and Dad said it was handled. That silence told me everything. Not that she orchestrated it as a teenager, she probably didn't. But that for 11 years, as an adult, she never once asked where her advantages actually came from. She just enjoyed them. I called a family meeting. My terms, my parents, Priya in person, no Daniel. I brought copies of Mr. Fenwick's records. I laid them on the table and asked my parents to explain, in front of Priya, exactly what happened to my portion of my grandfather's trust. My father tried the "we did what was best for the family" line. My mother cried and said I was bringing up old wounds during a crisis. Priya just stared at the papers, and for the first time in her life, I watched her realize that the floor she'd been standing on her whole life had actually been built out of my foundation. I told them I would not be paying for Priya's legal defense. Not out of spite, I made that clear, but because I refused to keep being treated as a resource that only mattered in emergencies. I told my parents that if they wanted to help Priya, they could start by being honest, including with the FBI investigators who were already asking questions about the source of funds in Daniel's accounts, about where family money had moved over the years. My mother went pale at that, because it turned out some of that same trust, Restructuring money had, at one point, briefly passed through an account that was now under federal scrutiny as part of Daniel's fraud investigation. My father's quiet mismanagement of my inheritance had accidentally left a paper trail that made their financial history relevant to a federal case. I want to be honest. I didn't leave that meeting feeling triumphant. I left it feeling hollow, the way you do when you finally get proof of something you already knew in your gut for 11 years. Priya ended up pleading to a lesser charge. She cooperated with investigators once the full picture came out, testified about what she knew regarding Daniel's business, and got probation and restitution instead of prison time, largely because she came forward with financial records my father hadn't wanted disclosed. Records that helped prosecutors build the case against Daniel. Daniel is currently serving a federal sentence. Their marriage didn't survive it. My parents, for their part, had to sit through depositions about the trust fund mismanagement as part of the broader financial investigation. Nothing criminal came of it for them. The statute of limitations and the gray area nature of trustee decisions protected them legally, but it became something everyone in our extended family eventually heard about. My aunt, one of Daniel's investors, found out where some of my inheritance had gone and stopped speaking to my parents entirely, furious on my behalf. The golden narrative my parents had built for 30 years, devoted family, model daughter, cracked wide open in front of everyone who used to admire it. Priya reached out to me about a month after everything settled, not asking for money this time. She asked to meet alone, and she apologized, really apologized, the kind with no but attached to it. She told me she'd started therapy, that untangling 30 years of being told she was the special one was harder than she expected, and that she wanted to actually know me. Not just know I existed as her older brother. We're rebuilding something slowly. It's careful. It's not what it should have been if things had been fair from the start, but it's real. My parents are a different story. My father still hasn't apologized, still frames the trust decision as what any responsible parent would do. My mother has apologized, sort of in the vague, deflecting way she's always apologized, heavy on "I'm sorry you feel that way," light on actual accountability. I see them maybe twice a year now, brief, guarded visits, mostly for Priya's sake more than theirs. Update: it's been 3 months since the family meeting. A few things worth adding for anyone who's been following along. Priya finished her probation intake and started paying restitution to the investors she recruited. Including our aunt, she insisted on doing it herself instead of letting our parents handle it for her, which honestly might be the first fully adult decision I've seen her make. She and I now talk maybe once a week. She sent me a photo last month of her first apartment since the divorce, completely unremarkable, a little bare, entirely her own. She captioned it starting from actual zero for once, and I think that's the most self-aware thing she's ever said to me. My father sent me one email 2 weeks ago, 3 lines. No apology, just a request to let bygones be bygones for the sake of the family. I haven't responded. I might eventually, but on my terms, not his timeline. My mother has started sending Mira and me updates about Priya's progress, like she's trying to earn her way back into relevance through information instead of honesty. It's not enough. But it's something, I guess. As for me, I finally did something I'd been putting off for 11 years. I used part of the restitution Priya insisted on paying back into a shared account, along with matching funds of my own. And I started a small scholarship fund at my old high school for kids working through school without family financial support. I named it after my grandfather. It felt like the only way to actually finish what his trust was supposed to do in the first place. I didn't get an apology that fixed everything. I don't think that apology exists. What I got instead was the truth, finally, after 11 years of silence. And honestly, that turned out to be worth more than any amount of money my parents could have handed me at 18. I just wish it hadn't taken a federal fraud investigation to get it.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want more fascinating Reddit tales, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to Archives of Reddit. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.